Okay, let's start learning. We're in Mamar Bet Perik Aleph, which is page 6 if you have your printouts. Page 6, the Mamar Bet Perik Aleph in the second paragraph. Until now, we discussed the idea of having taivas for dvarim ha-mutorim creates a reality which you get a bit stuffed up in ruchnias. Here he continues in Mamar Bet Perik Aleph, second paragraph. Hinei yesh kama chilukei madrigot beteva nefesh ha'ba'amit. Your animal instinct persona, that's us, has different levels in its nature. Yesh misha nefesh ha'ba'amit shelo eino chazak kol kach. Not drawn to, some people are more like cerebral and maybe less experiential, and therefore they're not drawn heavily just to obsessive desires and pleasures. He's selective. He knows how to say no sometimes. I guess that's most of us. We're not like heavily, to walk around gaping. We know how to say no when we have to. And even when he does have a desire, he's not like walking around, I need that, I don't know what, Carvel cake, I don't know what, whatever it be. I need that glass of whiskey. There are people with the experiential self. That's who they are. Their brain is not what guides them, and they're very, 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 they're very experiential. He wants everything. He's just a pleasure-seeking animal, which I would say has a lot to do with a lot of people in the Western world. And this obsessive nature is very strong and it's very, very awake. He will not relax. He's constantly seeking pleasures, which is a typical, if you ask many, many people in the Western world, they're there making money in order to enjoy. There are situations, puts us back in the board, where naturally your nefesh ba'amis is not that strong. He has a certain amount of cerebral person. He knows how to say no. But it gets strong. How? When he gets into obsessive desires, even mutter. He gets into pleasure. He slowly but surely you condense yourself. Pesach. I've got to be in this hotel somewhere in Utah. And I don't know, and I have to get a helicopter ride in the Grand Canyon. It becomes part and part, and it's all over Ami magazine. And all these different things, you know what I mean? Ashikua, it becomes that strengthens and develops that idea of pleasure seeking in a very, very strong, almost obsessive way. It's so-called the ultimately, once you get into it, you stop thinking. So you may be a very fine person which thinks and decides and chooses, but you easily lost if you're constantly into filling your taivas. And this is very important. It's a zoyer in chelik aleph daf pei kuf pei. Yadua shatoka the nefesh ba'amit gorem chalishut nefesh elokit. The more you feed and nurture your experiential self, this is so true that it's terrible. I deal with education, so I know how it works. How to get kids which are introduced to Judaism through the touchy-feely, cuddly stuff, they stop thinking because they're very much into experience and pleasure. Okay, davening is so beautiful. Sometimes it's pretty hard. Or Shabbos is so beautiful. Sometimes it's hard. And then when it gets hard, they lose it. And this is a Zayir in Chelik Aleph. It says, Tukfa de gufa, chulsha de nishmasa. The more the body is nurtured, the weaker the soul becomes. The tokef chumrius had the nefesh bahamis, the strength the materialism of that animal instinct self, gorem chalishut nefesh elokish. It's very simple. The more you're into feelings and experiential pleasure, I mean, you can have pleasure from going to a Hasidic tish, you know what I mean? Pleasure from having a malka. If you're doing it just for the purpose of pleasure, or like a musical concert, it's okay, it's kosher, it's MBD or chveisvas, and it's separate seating. Yeah, so what? But why are you doing this? Is this enhancing something? Do you need psychological release? Give me logical reasons of why you're doing it, or it's just a thing you're doing because I saw the advert and it's Hanukkah, or things like that. No, I don't think things work that way. So this is what he says. He says, "Toikev chumis nefesh habam is garm chalishas nefesh elokis." People ask me, Rebbe, why doesn't it work in my learning? Or why doesn't it? I don't feel I'm getting kavanah and davening. Of course you don't feel kavanah and davening because you're a Baal Taiva. Okay, once you see a steak, you go crazy. Or once you indulge, even in Taivas Mutaras. Okay? So how do you expect for your nefesh elokis, your cerebral self, to rail supreme? And he says, the eno shaykh klal. It's impossible for you to totally comprehend some godly idea to contemplate in your gasha yan eloki benafsho. You have an idea. Will that idea excite you and you like feel it tingling in your fingers? No, it won't. You may understand it because you're a bright kid, but will it do something to you? Did you ever learn about Yichud Hashem and get so into it that you really want to get this happening to you? For the Kol Belokusin, to incorporate yourself in godliness? It cannot happen to a person which is drawn in Taivas. Because that's the first thing which goes. What first thing goes is, it's like when you're a diabetic. The first thing that goes is a sense of feeling, for example, in your toes, It's interesting. The first thing that goes in the Nefesh Elokis is the fact that if the Nefesh Bahamas gets big with Taivas, you stop losing the sensitivities to that godly ideas should talk to you, excite you, and like for real. The next stage of it, you also lose your Shamayim. You even stop thinking about God. You're not there, okay? Even things which you realize are against the will of God. It's an Isser. If he's the Baal Taiva, he's going to do it, although it's an Isser. It's an Isser. For goodness sakes, keep your eyes in your sockets and your hands in your pocket. You're not capable. You know why? Because you're too much into your guy Taivas. It doesn't prevent you and stop you from even doing Averis. Because the idea of godliness and the will of God is not something you feel. The idea that emes is not something which touches your sensitivities. Because your sensitivities are totally dull because they're indulged in animal behavior, which equals gashmis. What are you talking about? I'm Orthodox. I'm a rabbi. I teach Torah. I don't know. You say whatever you want. I believe in God. No. Emes, which is a osal pitayra. He knows the Sifrin Shulchan Aruch omnam gamken eino nirgish b'nafshay. So you know it, but that knowledge does not affect your emotional self. In other words, you have chokhmah, you have bina, but you lack das. The capability of translating a cerebral reality that should touch you into your senses, that should guide your sensitivities, that's lost. So the only thing that can stop a taiva is that when a cerebral idea is something which became real and vivid to you. If it doesn't, what's going to stop you except for my yomer abrios? And when you're in a cheder chadorim where no one sees, Yeah, I remember once I was in New York in the summer, and they told me that the Satmar Rebbe made a takana that the husbands that their wives are in the country and up in the Catskills, they shouldn't have tinted glasses in their cars. Shouldn't have tinted windows. Why? Because Chalil v'chas tinted windows, people won't see what's in it. They can do komini averos. So they made sure they couldn't have, people. It's unbelievable. People. The only thing that keeps people religious is my yom Abrios. It should be my yomer nefesh elokis, my yomer elokim. The answer is because that's not nirgash benafshe. Why not? So he tells you because we run after prime grill. Or I need that was Harmony suit or that Ferragamo tie. That the idea of that. That's what we're talking about. If you can't live without it, and your obsessive desire for it, then something's wrong. Something's totally wrong. Because all this comes because you've immersed yourself in taivas of heter. This is a big adracha lemais. It's not a good word to say at the table. But if we want to grow spiritually, it's we can tell you all about the spheres and all about the b'china of Ram, b'china of Yitzchak. That ain't gonna help much. He goes for the jugular. He says, "You want to know why it ain't working?" Because we don't contain, our mind does not contain our animal instincts, and as soon as there's something which is a bit pleasure, we run to it. So how to grow is first to contain that. Stop running after. Stop being about type. So your animal instinct, your experiential self has become very strong and dominant. Nefesh elokis, and your godly persona equals that which resides in your brain. Nachlash b'yosh has become very weak. It doesn't really get there. But therefore, and thus, when you have that aspect of yourself, say, "Hey, this is really nice." It's also. Why do I have to deal with people that have problems with the internet? They surf where they shouldn't surf. Why does everybody have a filter? Because somehow, and why do people, I don't want to say what, they had to deal with Shlem bias already with people. Well, why? Because you're about Taiva. You're about Taiva. It all starts becoming about Taiva Baruchnius. It means to say, yeah, we're going to dance and have a nice kumsitz. And then it becomes about Taiva Begashmius, which should be about Seichel, because Kabbalah's oil. And this is what he says, Taivas and Heter are the biggest problem. נמשך אחר ונכשל בזה רחמנא ליצלן, ובזה מובן בפשיטוס, איך הוא זה שמשתה את עצמו בטוב הדבר. How is it that you fool yourself saying this is good, שהרי הוא רע גמור, this is terrible for you. ומוריד נפשי מאוד, and you're bringing yourself down. We're not talking about putting you into hell. That is something, or heaven or something. We're not talking about einish. You are taking a jewel and you're throwing it in the mud. If you only look at what the nefesh elokis is, and you're totally weakening it, you have your whole godless is sheyeda adam shakel boroi v'yoda le'al kach. That's what you have, a tremendous tool. You have a tzelem elokim, and you're putting it down, weakening it. It can't work. So that's not going to help you. You can davening like a windshield wiper, and you know what I mean, have it and shuckle away and shmones. It's not going to happen. This is the reason for the chulsha that we're not mistake, because we live too much in taivas. Sometimes I think this is the machla of post World War II Judaism. We have too much opulence and too much affluence, and therefore we're drawn to it. Are you kidding? Every advertisement. Oh, hi, Ellen. Regards from Yaakov.
Thank you. He had a lovely time. Thank you.
Yeah, well, he's a great guy.
Or Baruch
Anyway,
Hashem.
he lives with his nefesh elokis, Baruch Hashem. He's not in L.A. Baltaiva.
Baruch Hashem.
Neither are you. It's okay, but but you know what I mean. Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Thank God. These are the type of kids that's worth my mother's chavla later that can introduce people to the world of thought. You know what I mean? I guess that's the reason my mother had to suffer my terrible, vicious tennis the youth. Okay. Anyway, going back here. So this is the cloud. You're married. It's not a question, oh, it doesn't mean married to Gehenna. It means you're lowering yourself. Now there's another. So why do you do Averis? The first thing we do Averis because we're drawn to experiential and pleasure. Because we weakened our cerebral sense of self. We no more think before we do anything, or even if the thinking it doesn't do anything to you. It's the same thing when people learn in a yeshiva. I see this, that's a nice word. You know what I mean? I don't understand. I remember I said to Shir once, and people said, "Oh, Rabbi, that was beautiful." So I said, "My friend, beautiful is supposed to be my wife. It says, this is supposed to be emes. Who cares about beauty? I mean, the Torah of Zayin Emes. I know it says doesn't learn Torah emes. It doesn't say doesn't learn the Torah yofa. Okay, this is I don't understand. There's a beauty in truth, granted. But first of all, it has to be emes. And since what they do is they these nice little divorce. Oh, you have two dinim, and it fits like everything in the world has two hoops, either chefzer or gavra. So you can always fit into one or the other, and you feel good about it. Oh, isn't it sweet? Isn't it? Isn't the honest truth? Is that the intent of the author of this text? No. So what are you doing? Half truths are lies, as far as I'm concerned. People have to look for truth. They should have pleasure from finding truth, and they should be abhorred from experiencing things which are not accurate. I mean, live your science, as one would say. You know what I mean? Live your math. That's what Judaism is supposed to be about, and that gets lost because of taivas heter. Get that in the book. This is the biggest yesod we've come up so far. Taivas heter, nama'ar cerebral nefesh elokis, and then it's weakened, and then we're drawn even to isurim finally. Amnam b'yena sota, there's something else. This is the fourth paragraph on page 7. There's another thing, part of this is once again, we always feel, I'm going to do this sin, I'm going to do this, okay? And I'm not even you don't even want to talk about the Jewish, the frum sins, like cheating in business, okay, lying for money, Knevas das, which is an Isser D'Oraisa. Okay, I just want to put that Rabbeinu Yonah right that with the Gemara is a machlekes with the Gezel Akum is an Isser D'Rabbanan Isser D'Oraisa. That's only b'makom she'ein chil Hashem. B'makom she'ein chil Hashem is a vadi Isser D'Oraisa. So Rabbeinu Yonah says maybe Gezel Akum may be D'Rabbanan, but Knevas das of a goy is vadi D'Oraisa. You have what I'm saying? In other words, cheating, Knevas das. Presenting things in a not an accurate way, and thus you're going to gain from it. That's an Isser D'Oraisa. And he says an unbelievable statement, Rabbi Yehuda says, Ki ha'emes misodei hanefesh. Truth is one of the foundations of the soul identity. You undermine that's an Isser D'Oraisa. It's already right before. So I'm trying, these are Averis. I hate to say it, it's terrible to say, but it's Maisim B'chol Yom. When you don't, when they ask you to sign something, say, "Is this the whole truth and nothing but the truth?" And you don't tell them, and you put the check. Yes, was yes. Das is Knevas das. Knevas das is an Isser D'Oraisa. For goodness sakes, the Torah says because we're numb, we don't care. It's a Sefer Shulchan Aruch, and you figure that God will forgive me, or God doesn't really care. And you don't think you're separated from God because of that. You don't understand that every Sefer Shulchan Aruch, you're cutting yourself away from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's what you're doing. I mean, yes, second line of that paragraph. That's what we feel. We feel we're comfortably we're not going to be cut away from God because of this small little thing. Hey, it's only a traffic ticket, so to speak. We figured that the bicycle, it's like speeding, it's like jumping a light. Yeah, you get a few points, but I'm still a good citizen, you know what I mean? Okay, no. The hine benishmas Yisrael yesh b'teva nafsham sheinam yecholim nifradim me'elokim. The truth of the matter is, your nefesh elokis tells you that the truth of it is you can never be totally torn away from God. That's the way it is. Mishum ki ato avinu, he's the source of your being. You're an expression of his chachma. You can't be torn away from him. He's your father. Umishum zeh, because of that understanding, it becomes so ingrained in Jewish history. The kal shebekalim uposhi Yisrael, this was true for centuries. The person which was weakest in his behavior, he religious pattern, even a Poishi Yisrael, was Meiser Anafsha al Kiddush Hashem. If they were told, embrace the Trinity, kiss the cross, or burn as a Jew, history bears us out that all Jews died. That's history. Now, what made that happen? They were not religious, and they didn't even see themselves as religious during living religion. I'm not talking about the person which saw himself Orthodox. No, Kal Shevekalim, Poshe Yisrael. They do. The religion I don't keep is Judaism, but I'm not going to be an apostate. I'm not going to do it. Okay, that's the reality. People died. Thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews died because of that. Why is that so? The Hainu, when they take away your life, that's the one thing we won't do. It's interesting to see that, okay? Why not? Because I can't walk away from identity. It's interesting. Why can't you? Well, the answer is because this is the Teva of Nishmas Yisrael, that God, the Jew, the neshama wants to be connected to its source. He says, he doesn't even say, well, God's part of the Trinity, so it ain't that bad. No, he won't do that. He's not just he's one walk away from God, even from the oneness of God. Equals he won't accept the Trinity or something like that. But if man would only know, any evil thing that you do, Lashon Hara, Rechilas, your neighbor's das, I'm not talking about marais, asurais, I don't want to talk about all these different normal averas which happen to us in the Western world, okay? What happens at that stage? He realizes nasa nifrod melakus. Don't you understand that you have every aver you do, you're cutting away a cord. It's like you have to understand that it's like a relationship which has so many cords to it for it to be tied together. And if you do certain things, you're cutting away your relationship. You may not feel totally divorced. You're still living in the same house together. But slowly but surely, if you cut away at those cords which tie you up to your spouse or something like that with behavior which is off, you're cutting yourself off from your wife. You're cutting yourself off from the person you live. You're cutting yourself off from what you're close to. Did you ever think that every time we do something shloi kedin, we're cutting away one of those cords of the relationship? There seems someone at the door. Just 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. So, well, you have to chop. You chop that everything we do. If he would realize that every time he does something like that, he's cutting away snipping one of those cords. I don't know. We're married people. We can think about it in our own relationships. How many of these small little cords, small little threads tie us together. And we understand that sometimes if we snip to one of those little threads, we try to fix it immediately because you realize that one thread, another thread, and ultimately God, every snip that goes away, something changes. So do you realize that every you do, something changes in that relationship? I mean, just think about it. You know what I mean? So he says, you wouldn't do it. This inclination of being separate and independent, that's what Ra means. Ra does not mean evil. I gotta translate this. Ra comes from the word in Hebrew, Tiro'em b'shevet barzel. It's a pasuk in Tehillim, the very beginning. You will splinter them with a metal with an iron rod. Ra means to say independent, splintered away from source. Yetzer hara, the inclination of cutting away from the source. It's called the inclination of being independently self and not thinking myself as a chip off the block. Okay, no, you're nothing more than a chip off the block, brother dear. You're part of the block. You're part of the source. Wanting to deny your source equals Ra. Okay, so that's what Ra means. Because Ra also means Ray. Ra is also Ray, a friend. The friend is the idea, two chips off the same block. Same idea. Yetzer hara is taking, chipping the block. You have it. The idea is to splinter. That's what Ra means, splintering. So Yetzer hara, that sense of inclination of being splintered from the source, masito will entice you. She'im kolzei no nifrad melukus. You're not divided from God. No, this is just okay. Sometimes I remember I once thought about it, like, how do I exactly sin if I believe in Hashgacha Pratis? Well, is it because I think the God is on vacation between certain hours on Sunday? He's writing tickets somewhere else. He's busy in Times Square now. He's not going to bother me in Chicago. What? Who comes to Chicago? It's a godless place, right? Okay. Yeah, he goes to New York. Don't all the Haredim say that God is in New York on the East Coast? So good, he gives us freedom on the West and Middle East, in the middle of America. You know what I mean? No, the worst place is Jerusalem. He's always there. So go live in Tel Aviv. That's far away. Don't you feel? That's how it works. It's so funny. You laugh. We all laugh of scissors. He's back here. Don't you understand? We have an idea that it's okay with us. He's cool. God's more chilled outside of New York. Okay, it doesn't work that way, brother. He's very passionate, international. And therefore, there's no. That's what they tell you. I'm just as frum as everybody else. I just do a few favors. And you also promise. That means he promised. You promise yourself. It'll be okay. Now, what's the pasuk in Chumash that says all this? What did the pasuk say in the beginning of Nitzavim? Bizbarech b'vavo lemor. You will feel good, bless yourself, and you will say, Shalom Yeli. Yeah, I will be okay. I'll be a perfect Jew. Ki b'shirut li be'elech, but I will follow my taivas. What does that mean? Shegamim yelech b'shirut li bo. Even if he follows his taivas, shalom yellow. He'll be shalom. He'll be fulfilled with himself. And because of that, Bava Nichshal become Advarim. So there's two things happening here. In other words, Shikua of Taivas do one thing. It numbs the capability of having your mind control your inclinations. That's number one we learned. B, once it does that, it simply numbs it. And therefore you just go for it. Not only does it numb it, it actually numbs it to the extent that you start making yourself apologetics and explaining that, it isn't that bad. That's what it's not an Avera, it's an Avera. You add the Lamed Hey at the end. That's what it's a Haimish Avera, you know what I mean? It's Haimish, you know what I mean? I think, the old world of honesty, Zechroina Levracha, okay, you know what I mean? I remember, I'll never forget this. I was culture shock. I was vacationing with we were newlyweds in a place called Knukka, that's on the English Channel, the North Sea, opposite England in Belgium. And I was playing tennis. What can you do? Playing tennis with this fellow, which was a diamond fellow, lived in Antwerp. This is near Antwerp, this place. It's like hours bike ride to Holland, and from there it edges of another hour, and you're in Antwerp. So all the people from Antwerp used to come there for vacation. I'm playing tennis with this guy. In the younger days, when I was a bit slimmer and I could nimbler, so I could actually play tennis. Once again, that's definitely Zichron Levracha. And I asked him, like, what do you do for I was curious. I said, what do you do for a living? So he says, I'm a diamond broker. So I was, we didn't have diamond brokers in Chicago or in Jerusalem, so I didn't even know what a diamond broker was. So what do you do exactly? So he says, well, I buy a packet of diamonds, and then I go to this place and say I paid X for it, and therefore you should give me Y for it. But actually, he paid something much less, and he's constantly, manipulating with the prices. So I say, Dudi, his name was Dudi. I think he's dead now. He says, so you lie. In other words, you're parnasa, you're b'shaka, you lie. He looks at me as if I was some kid from Chelm, some kind of halfwit. Says, you nar, literally in Yiddish. I lie more in one day than you do in a year. And he was happy about it. He wore a gartel and said Burichato, he was a good tennis player. You know what I mean? But I'm saying today, I don't understand. Why wasn't he swallowed up from the earth? How could he even say that to me? Yeah, no problem. I lie more in a day than you do, and that's sheker l'shem mammon. Sheker l'shem mammon, the Ritva says, is an issur deraisa. An issur deraisa, more than kulalma. No problem saying it. And he's sure that he's from, and you know what I mean? He won't shave during the 3 weeks and all the rest of the stuff. He'll do it, everything which is a minig. Nice, it's chashiv, it's a minig. He's makbid, but a license. That all starts from Taivus. That's what the Rebbe taught us. So the first thing to do is, therefore, he says, let's go to the next parak. So he says, Ube'emes, all these ideas of what forces brings us to these averis, say hayetzer hara. Oh, hi, Phil.
Sorry I'm late. There was some confusion today.
I realized that. I was also very confused. I went online at 7 o'clock. You know what I mean? So, and this is instead of last week. It's like, what can we do? We're older citizens. Okay, we're all back. As long as we're together. I'm just missing Howard, I see. Okay. Ube'em is koza mishtuse ayetzer, where in Maimer Beis Perik Beis page 8, Shemateu it simply misleads us and covers the truth. It pushes, this is really good. And why are you thinking it? Because you're not thinking what it really is. Let's be honest. God's sakes, I used to smoke until the age of 30. Pretty bad. I haven't touched anything since 30, and that's a lifetime ago, okay? Okay, my lungs are actually clean. But, it's a great thing to know. Because I remember when they were like speckled, okay? And I think it was great. How can you not have a decent Dunhill Red? It's a great cigarette. What was I, an idiot? Yes. You think I didn't know the science? There's one thing I know, I'm into the science. I knew the science. I know exactly what this kid, you didn't, that's the way it is, My father-in-law did to the age of 85, and he used to smoke Gitan, which is a black tobacco cigarette. So I figured, I did all these different manipulations in my mind. Yeah, it's okay. What happened to me? As that krimasvara, I wouldn't say in the Taisvus. How can I say such a krimasvara for myself? I got to ask this question. These are real questions, not vertelach for the table. How can you say it's such a crooked svara for your own self that you wouldn't do even in business? You wouldn't do it in your lab. You wouldn't. Hey, Alan, try doing that when you have to in engineering. You go bankrupt. No way. You do it yourself. You said this is, this is what it goes. This how it happens here. It's all because of typhus. We are drawn to experiences, and we thus numbs our thinking process. We're drawn to pleasure, and therefore it numbs our thinking process. It's frightening. I was sure smoking was good, but if this is something which he tells you to do, which is really, this is death. That's the pasuk in Chumash. Do you believe in God? Of course, I believe in God. Do you fast on Yom Kippur? Of course, I Yom Kippur. Do you believe in Torah L'Shamayim? Of course, I believe in Torah L'Shamayim. Well, the pasuk says, "Rein asat lefanecha yom v'sachayim v'satoy v'samavis v'sayra." It is God which equates this to death. So I understand you're rewriting the Bible. Umaridu ma'abed nafsho. What you're doing is diminishing your soul, as we discussed in the previous chapter, and you're losing it. Shemarida b'shoel tachlis. Here he brings you to the lowest level. Makam ha'klippas of sitra acham mishalish klippas atmeis. You are basically going down into a place that you want to be there, into the lowest level. You and the hog. V'oid lemata mehem. This is what the Tanya writes. They what is that? The externality, the alternative way of existence, which God is supposed to be there to reflect on you and say, that's where I'm not going. But that's a creation of God. God wants that to happen. God wants an alternative to exist for you not to choose it. That's what Bechira is for. So at least they are Mekablim Chiyusam V'Kiyumam Midvar Hashem. God made that because in order for us to have Bechira, we have to have Klippa, we have to have externalities, and we have to have alternative ways of doing things. Obviously, it is, you know it's Dvar Hashem, but we don't look at it that way, and therefore it looks like independent reality. There's godliness and there's something else, but that's also actually a God-created reality, allowing you to see it and then say to yourself, "Don't touch." Okay. That's why it's called another Lord, equals somewhat independent of God. It's not you don't see godliness in that. When you look at a Davar Asher, do you see, oh, this is Ratzon Elokim for it to be, for me not to do it? No, you don't see that. You don't see God at all. You see something that's the alternative of God. That's how you see it. So it's called Elohim Achirim, an independent, another Lord, he says. Why? Because it doesn't reflect the face of God. So what nurtures it? What's nurtured is, so to speak, metaphorically in a backhanded way. Because if it would reflect the face of God, metaphorically, so you would see that this is nothing more than one of these obstacles in an athletic march, which you have to jump over. No, but you see, there's something you have to embrace because you see the independent value and you stop running further in the race. That's called, you basically you see it wrong. It's Elohim, Achirim. You're giving it independence as another Lord in your life. Why? Because it doesn't reflect its purpose. That's why it's called, it only has its existence from the Achorayim, Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, metaphorically backhanded. So you don't see God in it. Lupirish Acharayim Ka'adam Anoisin Davar L'Sainai Shelo B'Rtzono Shemachshlichlei Ma'achei Ktefo Ki Machzir Panim Mimenu Misinato Oto. What does that mean? It means to say, in both instances, if I give you something, I want to give you a present, so I can give it to you because I care about you, and therefore it'll be a face-to-face reality. That's why Limud Torah is supposed to be panim b'panim. Thank God for Zoom. Okay. Because you're supposed to have a personal relationship with the teacher, and the relationship is expressed through the wisdom shared between you. What happens if it says panim b'panim dibra Hashem? God, so to speak, on Matan Torah, spoke to us panim b'panim, face to face, as opposed to what? What happens? I really can't stand you, but I got to give you the information. I'll show my back to you. Okay, so you get the information, but that will not represent or present a relationship. You got the information devoid of the relationship. That's what it means to say. It means to say when something is nurtured by God, God gave it its existence, but doesn't reflect God. It's a nice way of saying what you have there is a backhanded receiving of God's grace and God's shefa. Yeah, God, you see this Devar Avera. Of course, God created that reality, and God created the capability of doing it. But if it doesn't reflect God, it means it doesn't reflect that relationship. But if you would see it as that relationship, you would see it. Oh, that's the stumbling block that I'm supposed to avoid, or that's the hoop that I have to jump over. No, you don't see that. You don't see Bechira in every Ra. No one sees Bechira in every right. It means the Ratzon Hashem of Bechira. You don't see the majesty of man. But when there's so much evil in the world, don't you realize that's telling man you're a man, you're a prince, and you're capable of either circumventing or overcoming this? Every evil in life, every challenge in life should be seen as a pat on the back. God says you can do this, and that's a Rambam Amar Nevuchim, and the Rambam writes if in Nisai, there are two types of nisyonos. There are tests in life which come from man. You idiot! You put yourself in a place, and therefore you have a nisay. I can't expect you to live in a cat house, excuse me, and not to have a balititis. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm not asking you to live on South Beach, Florida, and to exactly not think Maris Asuras. Yeah, but who told you to go to South Beach? Go to snowy Chicago. You know what I mean? It's a bit different there, okay? You don't go there. What you want to go to a place where you have nisyonos? Then you make your own nisyonos. Don't blame God for those nisyonos. Those are nisyonos the man put on himself. But when every person has nisyonos, which he didn't actually put himself in, we all have nisyonos. God help me. I mean, I'm old enough to say, yeah, I've had plenty of them. Okay, challenges. You know what you see? The challenge. The Rambam says a challenge. That type of a challenge means that God believes that you can do it, and therefore He presented it to you. He says before he brings the medrash, the mashal, a person which is a potter, which he wants to sell his wares, wants to advertise. He's a master pottery man, so he knocks on the pots in public. Now he's only going to knock to show that they don't break, they don't crack. So he's only going to knock on the pots that he knows they won't crack. So the nisyonos which come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you should understand that's a vote of confidence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So don't run away from those nisyonos. Just overcome them and feel good. Say, God actually sent me a nice regard that He believes in me. But I think that most nisyonos man brings upon himself. That's the honest truth. Most nisyonos, if you have a nisyon, whatever it is, poverty, this and that, you didn't bring it upon yourself. So that means God put it upon you. That means He's willing to trust you that you're going to overcome this. And that's a tremendous vote of confidence, believe me. If you think about it for 2 moments of what that is, okay? But Nabach, most of our nisyonos we bring upon ourselves. If we wouldn't bring them upon ourselves, we would do. That is not a vote of confidence. God, that's man engaging in suicidal behavior. And that's something totally different. So this is what he says. He says that when we talk about panim, when God is reflected in that, when you see that as bechira, that is actually the ultimate inner will of God. God wants to give nurture and existence to things that really reflect Him, which is Karav Elav. But Sitra Acher V'Atuma, when we talk about all the alternative things that we look at, today is not only alternative, today religion is alternative. Is what today we would call reality, which in the religious concept is called the alternative reality. Can we put this on the table? God hates this and despises this. Did you ever look at external reality, which is totally devoid of thought and kedusha, as something which God despises? So yes, that's what it is. He doesn't give it because this is going to reflect His will in creation. No, He does that because that will justify creation, because God wants, in order for us to have sechar, wants us to have bechira. But the goal is not creating tumah. The goal is tumah for not engaging it. Not that God wants the tumah to exist. It's as if He throws it in the backhandedly to His saina. And this is what he writes. This is all for bechira. The kafyan l'sitra achra, that they basically bend the alternative way. This goes back. I said this before in English. Ulefi shebchinat panim. When we look at alternative reality, even definitely in Isser, this does not reflect in our eyes It doesn't reflect God's inner will. At the best, it is nothing more than a challenge which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to overcome. To the extent is, now what does that mean? There are things which are an expression of. So when I look at things which are subtle, holy, intelligent, this is an expression of God's will. God wants a thinking world. When I see things which are not so, but what nurtures it? What nurtures it is godliness, is will. But his will is not expressed in its existence, it's the reason of its being. In others, it's called makif. It hovers above, means you don't actually perceive it. I'll use a concept like this. You have in the Zohar called or hasovev v'or memaleh. The light of God which is above us and surrounds us, and the love of God which fills reality. What fills reality, I look at science and I see Dvar Hashem Shemayim Nasu Ruach Piv Kosvam. And I can really have a religious experience by going into a telescope. But when I look at Tumah, I don't see God. I see a creation that God made for me to run away from. In other words, that's called something which it's not reflected in its essence. It's a God which is beyond my comprehension. It's above me. It's not something I can experience, because you're not supposed to experience. You're supposed to experience the negation of it, not it. Okay? So what you really have there is a God. God is the reason of it, but this doesn't reflect. It's not the slapshi. It's not the expression of his will. But this is a negative expression. I'm making this for you not to engage in it. That's why I call it's makif. It's something which is beyond the regular experience. It's like when you learn something, you understand it, it fills you. When you don't understand it, oh yeah, it's somewhere above me. I know it's there, but I can't really, I can't experience it. Did you ever learn to feel that way? That sometimes do you really have it? And then you feel good, you're full, and something. Well, it's something like this. When people, I've done bechinos for years. I've said, well, it's something like this. Something is not a word. Something like this means nothing. Okay, it means isn't that a Gemara somewhere? Yes. So, at least if you tell me daf and line, I'd be happy. But it's a somewhere. That's makif. Makif means we know that there's a God and everything, because there can't be a God. There has to be God's will in the creation of the seat of Christianity in Rome. If not, it wouldn't exist. But it's not something you experience when you go through the Vatican. But you realize that there's nothing devoid of God's will, therefore it must be there. But we can't say that the seat of the Vatican is an embodiment of God's will. Not the embodiment. It is caused by God's will. That's how we experience it. Okay, that's why it's called makif, surrounding us, hovers above us, versus internalized, we can feel it. It's like a chachma which is not internalized. So that's what he says. This is not mislabish al makif. Again, I'm in the third paragraph, the third line. Kachi makom amisa v'atum Hashem yishmerenu. Ki amitat achiyut hu elokut shu b'chinas elokim chayim. The absolute existence is God, is Elokim, which is called Elokim Chaim. When we want to talk about what is the shame of God giving Torah to Klal Yisrael, Pasuk in Chumash, Hashar Ma'am Divrei Elokim Chaim Mitoich Ha'esh. Yes, this we feel the God essence of life. I experience life, hopefully, unless you're really drugged up, then you don't. If you experience life, that means if you experience a God of life. It's called an experience, really feeling it. Moshe Katuv, Vashem Elokim Emes, Hu Elokim Chaim. Pirush Liot Shu Elokim Emes Harei Elokim Chaim. If this is my absolute God, so obviously this is what my life is. Dinei Emes Hu. What does Emes mean? When I say Hashem Elokechem Emes, does it mean he's true? No. This is my Maimonides and Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah Perik Aleph Halacha Gimel. It means absolute, something which always is. Perpetual. Something which is not absolute is a relative truth, but it's not an absolute truth. That's why Maimonides discusses this at length. I said she would look at Perik Aleph Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah Halacha Gimel. When we say emes, we mean something which is perpetual, which is constant. Mashiesh ba'efsek nikra kazav. This is the Mishnah in Parah. Mishnah in Parah says, Noharos mechazvim For example, these sporadic, like in Israel, we have these sometimes creeks, nachal. A nachal, what is the nachal? It doesn't have a constant source of water, but when there's an influx of rain, so the water comes down from the hills, and there's a whole river there. We engaged that many times in near the Dead Sea. You have floods. Okay, that's called a nachal michazev. That's not mayim chayim. That's puzzle for the water of Parah Aduma. You need mayim chayim. Okay, mayim chayim means to say not something which comes from a non-consistent source. It has to be something which is the constant source, which is not well water, not rainwater, but actually, fountainhead water from a mayim, from a spring. So he says, "Hine emes hu m'she'eino nifsak olam." You're going to daven Ma'ariv today sometime. Hashem Elokechem emes. That means he's absolute. Nothing changes. Emes, umashi yesh bo hefsik nirka kozov. That's called kozov. Ukmo na'arot amnechazvim. That's a Mishnah in Parah. Shenikru kozov lefi shenifsakim lefamim, because they're sporadic. They stop and they start. Ki emes hu davar she'eino nifsak la'olam. A very important thing to know when you daven. I repeat again, this is Rambam and Perik Aleph Yisodi HaTorah. Perik Halchi Gimel. When it says Hashem Elokim emes, means that. It doesn't mean he's true versus a lie. It means he's absolute. When you daven Rosh Hashanah, Katalakim emes, Dvarcha Makena emes, V'kayam la'ad, that's what you say. The Dvar Hashem is Kayam la'ad, that's why it's called emes. It's a constant, it never stops. That's what it means. And when something is life, we say Mayim Chayim. Mayim Chayim means, as opposed to Mayim Mechazvim in Mishnah in Parah. Mayim Chayim means coming from a source which is constant. The Mishum Zeh Naharot HaMechazvim Psulim L'Kiddush Meichatos. That's why water which comes from these sporadic springs or these sporadic creeks is puzzle for Parah Aduma. Why? Because they're not called Sheinam Nikrim Mayim Chayim. The dafka davar amiti she'eino nifsek la'olam hu anikra chai. So when I say, "Are you alive?" that means, "Are you forever?" You say davar melch yisrael chai v'kayam. It means to say whatever David was for us, that's forever. Oh, his body's dead. I promise you, and don't worry about it. Okay, he ain't walking around, Brooklyn. But you know what? Chai v'kayam. That's what you said in Kiddush Levana. Davka davar amiti she'eino nifsek la'olam hu nikra chai. V'zeu Hashem Elokim emes hu Elokim chayim. That's the pasuk in Yirmiyah Perik Yud. Hashem Elokim emes hu Elokim chayim. That's the pasuk in Yirmiyah. The liyot she'elokim emes, he is absolute. She'ein bezeh kilayon ve'efsad chas v'sholom hu Elokim chayim. That's what life really is. B'chinat chai v'kayam. That's what I told you before by David HaMelech. Mitzad atzmai shechai v'kayam la'ad. Baruch chai la'ad v'kayam la'netzach. Didn't you say that in the morning? Baruch chai la'ad v'kayam la'netzach. V'chol ha'davuk la'lukus. Anybody that cleaves to that fount of perpetual existence, apple existence, kam kein b'chinat chai. He's also in somewhat cleaves to perpetual reality. Because it becomes nothing more than a vehicle. His life is the life of godliness, and God expresses himself in him, not in a makif, but a mislabesh. When you learn Teres Elokim, what does that mean? Because you become a vehicle of Chochmas Elokus. And Chochmas Elokus is absolute and perpetual. You are now a vehicle of Chochmas Elokus. There's a certain absoluteness which is now implanted in me. A person lives without taivus, so he thinks only about being a vehicle. And there, Mashaomer Abusen Zechem Livracha, Asar and Ikraim Chaim. It says, Officer of Nasan. There are 10 things which are called Chaim. Hashem Elokim Emes, Hu Elokim Chaim, HaTorah Nikras Chaim, Shenemer Eitz Chaim Hilam Machzikim Bavzumchem Hushar. That means say it's perpetual. Yisrael Nikreim Chaim. Shenemer Vadem Hadveikim B'Hashem Elokim. If we cleave to the perpetual God, Chaim Kulchem Ayom. Yodvukim B'Hashem Mishum Zeh Nikreim Chaim. So this is the cloud. The cloud is that when we look at something which takes us away from godliness, we simply are not Chaim. We're called Mesim. We're called Mechazvim. We live in a totally different existence, which is not what God expected us to be. Okay, this should be enough for today. I mean, I'm doing this on purpose. It's not vertelach, but this is like really telling it the way it is. We have to learn one thing. The Rebbe is telling me that I have to try my best to, I look at a unbelievable custard they're going to give me for dessert. You think twice whether you really need it or want it. And even if you're going to eat it, like wait 5 minutes before you gorge into it. You have to be able to walk away from being controlled from any gashmis or obsessive desire. That is the key of failure, leading even to Aveirish, but definitely, as the Rebbe said before, in Havanas HaTorah and Avodas HaTefillah. We all want to daven. And we want those prayers to be heeded. Well, it's going to start by okay, you have to eat your proteins and your calciums and your whatever other good things you have to eat. But try to be careful to walk away from taivas. At least don't let the taivas be shoylet on you. And that's a big yesod we've learned so far. Believe me, if I stop here, we already did something worthwhile. Have a great one. See you guys in 2 weeks. Bye. Bracha v'atzlacha. Good to see you all.